But we are not only traumatized, we also endure. It is not the trauma itself that validates a field worker's claim to knowledge, but how we experience and make sense on it in ways that guide deeper and more attuned engagement with our work, our relationships, and ourselves. Can you help me with the video? Before I move on, I want you to think a better feel for yourself. If you experience that 20 to 25 seconds per picture was too long, if you feel that you knew the images or the stories that you were looking at, and therefore you didn't need to stare at them that long, if you wanted to stop looking, if you were uninterested or lost interest on the way, what happened to you? Were you mobilized by something or not at all? What were you mobilized? Why you weren't mobilized? I experienced several times that some people who came to visit my exhibition after some minutes, after a quite superficial look, they could exclaim that, oh, this is fantastic or beautiful, or just be quiet or quiet with tears in their eyes. They might then share a post on social media and say that this exhibition was important, or that the people had to see it, that the topic was really important. In a way, they claim to have seen, to have understood. However, I have many times wondered, what have they seen? What can they claim to have seen through that quick look? Why could they not observe it longer? Look at the details, contemplate all the image, all the poems. Is it because they think they know the topic trauma, childhood, and the role of art in the healing process, so they didn't need to observe closely the paintings or the poems? Or maybe they are not used to observe art pieces, so they don't know what to see? Or it is because what the topic echoing in them, and therefore the reaction is avoidance. My teacher and my therapeutic yoga education taught me that understanding others' pain, other lives' stories, other ways to express their stories. After all, we carry our stories and wounds as best as we can, demands that one holds oneself. She expresses in Norwegian, for å romme andre må man romme seg selv. That means to hold ourselves, to contain ourselves, to embrace difficult emotions, impulses, and memories that relating to others and their stories can create in us. We do it spontaneously without thinking about it when the emotions are good. The situation is different when the emotions are difficult. When we don't hold or contain our emotions and feelings, we cannot contain or hold others. And then we might escape, shut down, avoid, divert, rush into advising, trying to fix, repair, instead of just listening. Doing nothing else than listening to the other's stories and listening what is going on in ourselves. Staying in the same place. To hold or to contain demands awareness and self-awareness. This knowledge has never been as crucial as is regarding social scientists working in an exploration of trauma or researching in zones marked by conflict and violence, or in dealing with topics of poverty, marginalization, violence, racism, or abuse. How might, for instance, anthropology of genocide or violence of other forms of human suffering to impact the ethnographer and as such the knowledge production? This kind of research implies relation to the other's pains or different wounds. This supposes for me an ethical choice. The explorer's position with regard to the pain and the suffering of the others. This shapes the explorer's perception and thinking and what she is able to convey, say about it or not. In her book, The Body in Pain, The Making and Unmaking of the World, the American professor of literature and language, Elan Escari, states that to have great pain is to have certainty. To hear that another person has pain is to have doubt. Considering what I have just said, I think that about doubt here also as a lack of capacity of holding, of containing either one's own pain or the difficult emotions that can arise in you if you don't have experiences that connect to what you are listening to. One don't need to have experienced the same to be able to tune to others' experiences, but it demands training, awareness training. It is about developing a sensibility toward others' wounds. Blocking, forgetting, denial, and minimizing are common ways to cope with trauma. And this might parallel the reaction of those who witness the telling of the trauma or the painful experiences. If the conversation is experienced by the researcher as difficult, she, he, they might react by, for instance, not being fully present during some portion of the conversation. This can pose a challenge for the researcher's ability to record and later present such stories. Feeling emotionally overwhelmed might hinder the researcher to record straightforward after the interview or a conversation. Then a poem, a picture, a piece of music not only offer a language of communication for what is inexpressible through scientific words, but might also offer a tool of recovery, of awareness, of embracing that which is emotionally difficult, and as such, be a complementary way of registering the research experiences. It's in this sense that art can assist scientific research, but this is not the only way. In my experience as an artist, as an anthropologist, my artistic practice has assisted me at different stages of a different scientific research project. My artistic practice helped me to deal with the difficult emotions that might arise working with the topics and contexts I have repeatedly chosen to research, be it inequality, marginalization, injustice, abuse of power, structural violence, discrimination, racism, unbelonging, and exclusion. I have experienced encountering myself in the fieldwork without words to precisely describe others' stories and how they echo in me in the field notes. Violence of all kinds might unmake words and as such language. However, pain can be expressed through sensory or affective reactions. Not all might manage to put into language painful experiences or what to share, or to share it with strangers, in this sense, the researcher. Let me share an example. During one of my fieldwork experiences, a participant shared with me her drawings. They were not realistic, but they were not fully abstract. They conveyed pain, and through the drawings, she could verbally and emotionally, on the run, tell me that she was a survivor of several rapes when she was a child and escaping from war. The pain she could not express with words to me, she expressed it with her drawings, which has stayed with me and later have made me recall my embodied listening to her pain. In this context, her artistic approach made it easier for me to feel her story and understand more deeply in ways that a short and quick utterance could not. My art training has helped me to develop awareness and self-awareness in relation to seeing and listening. I don't believe that the researcher has to have the same experience than the research participant to listen to them justly. However, this might not be the case for the research participants, especially if they have bad experiences from before, with asymmetries of power and subtle forms of abuse. Trauma occurs in a perpetual present. It's always happening, and therefore it demands much more from a researcher in relation to awareness about a lack of shared experience, possible and examine racism or ignorance about own privileges. A participant of my current research project about unbelonging and racism in Norway, putting toward the asymmetry in relation to experiences and the danger of not being aware of it from an early experience as an interview subject. She said that at this time it was important for her that I knew how it is to experience racism. These are not things we can talk easily about, she said. But for a white researcher, my painful experience are a thought experiment. She does not go through it. It's something else for me. It's very tiring to talk about painful experiences. It takes a lot to talk about it. So I get tired after the conversation while the white researcher does not. It again makes a difference. I know you get tired too when we talk about these things. The white researcher goes on while I sit here with my painful experiences and what I experience again by telling my story. Sometimes any verbal response to a personal testimony is insufficient and can almost belittle it. As Becky Thompson points out, sitting with the pain might be the only response that doesn't cheapen the power of its recounting. My artistic practice also helped me to delay conceptualization. As an anthropologist, my research practice is based on listening, observing and imitating doing what the research participants do. As an undergraduate student in anthropology, I was taught the importance of the rigor in gathering of data through participant observation, and therefore contemplation, exploration, and open-mindedness were imperatives. I was taught that how we observe has consequences from what kind of questions we pose to what we see and the analysis we derive from our observations. However, I was not offered techniques to develop a reflexive practice. I went to my first fieldwork without any training in observation, in tuning, in developing awareness and self-awareness. I found this in the arts during my apprenticeship with the Norwegian painter Jan Valentin Sæther. He taught me that how we see and what we see influence what we know. Nevertheless, our vision practices are highly influenced by what we already know. So the reciprocal relationship between seeing and knowing is in reality a hierarchical one. Once we have learned and internalized ways of knowing, it is not easy to challenge and reshape our ways of seeing and thinking otherwise. With the years, I will have understood that developing awareness of the act of seeing will in turn awaken awareness of the politics of seeing and knowing that influence the process of scientific knowledge development. The first time I used art in my scientific research directly was in 2009. I had completed my first ethnographic fieldwork on the pulp industry on a town in Uruguay. I felt the urge to gestalt what I have experienced, observed, and listened to. I have followed a group of young musicians and dancers who prepare for the carnival season. Uruguay's carnival season is the longest in the world. It is a major event, and groups prepare for the carnival weeks most part of the year. Following the young through the preparation, I also learned about their struggles. Their lives were constrained by job instability, insecurity, uncertainty about the future, by the fact that upward social mobility was increasingly difficult to achieve. Some young were single parents, several had dropped out of secondary school, they have complicated relationship to their parents, and sought relief in alcohol and cocaine. Back in Oslo again, then I started an oil painting that gave shape to those feelings and observations I haven't managed to put into words in the field notes. This creative activity was not an attempt to represent the field studied differently, an attempt to reproduce what I have heard or observed. The painting was not driven by a search for an alternative ethnographic method, but experiencing the youth's difficult circumstances, experiencing different forms of structural violence, learning about their life and struggling and tuning myself to those words daily and for many months, had a strong emotional impact on me. Thus, I had a need to express differently than through a scientific analysis. However, it was while painting this image that I discovered that it assisted me in the analysis of my ethnographic data. It offered me another perspective because by reflecting about my emotions, it created awareness of my perception and as such gave me a critical distance necessarily for knowledge development. I perceive this practice as creating the condition to think new thoughts rather than rushing to what we already know. This was my way to postpone conceptualization, thinking without concepts that might close my horizon of understanding instead of opening it. The painting, which was not the result of a conscious idea, I will paint a wistful, sad carnival, turned me to that image intuitively and gave me a new understanding of my material. Thus, in my book, I ended thinking about the negative effects of the pulp industry through the carnival. Since carnival is a tradition, its recurrence facilitates the apprehension of change in a community. Traditional carnival theory, based on the work of Mikhail Bakhtin, has focused on the inversive, cathartic, and chaotic character of the popular feast. However, in Fraiventos in 2009, the carnival was different than the mainstream carnival theory placed emphasis on. Thus, it was the painting which helped me to see the carnival differently than established theories of carnival, and to make an original contribution to the study of local neoliberal processes through the establishment of the global pulp industry in this rural area. The thoughts and analysis that this painting helped me to evolve didn't stop there. This painting became part of the SOAR series and contributed to my thinking about trauma and wounds, both at the individual and the collective level. Art, contrary to science, is much more processual in its approach. It is less result-oriented and more open-ended. The dialogical nature of the insights it creates is much more evident than in science. It is also in the sense that I believe that art can assist the process of research analysis. In my case, the exhibitions meet an audience and help me continue shaping my insights and analysis. My way of thinking, the benefit of a processual approach offered by arts, relate to twisting Stenger's formulation, ways to provoke thoughts that do not require other verification than slowing down reasoning and creating an opportunity to arouse a slightly different awareness of the problems and situations that mobilize us. The Belgian philosopher Isabel Stenger resorted to Dostoevsky's character of the idiot to explain what slowing down reasoning means. The idiot character, she explains, is the one who always slows the others down by resisting the consensual way in which the situation is presented. And as such, the emergencies mobilize thought and action. The idiot cannot answer why or discuss the issue at hand, but make us pause. The idiot demands that we slow down, that we don't consider ourselves with the power to believe we possess the meaning of what knowledge is. I consider my art-based approach as being of this nature. It is my idiot. In this manner, I think about research-based approach as creative field notes, findings, analysis in progress, and as knowledge sharing, or the so-called research dissemination. The last way in the arts assist my research is the ethics of representation. My artistic practice assists me in the ethic of representation and in combining my research not only to scientific audience, but first and foremost to the research participants and to a wider audience. I understand knowledge development in social science as multisensorial and intersubjective. However, this is often played down when it comes to scientific publications. Scientific publications might make the analysis inaccessible to the research participants and the wider public. This closes down the dialogue, while art can powerfully convey research and engage not necessarily through rational argumentation, but through emotional resonance as well. As I said earlier, sometimes any verbal response to a personal testimony is insufficient and can almost belittle it. In such cases, I believe that an artistic approach can assist in doing this job more effectively. The British-Australian writer and scholar Sarah Ahmed examines a state report about the generation of Indigenous children who were violently taken away from their families as a part of Australian brutal policy of assimilation. Most of the children grew up without contact with their families. their communities and culture. The individual testimonies of pain and separation of the children who have turned into adults were gathered in the report. For Ahmed, the testimonies gathered are vital to understand this painful collective history. However, Ahmed asked, what are the conditions of possibility for hearing such stories? A testimony in a report or in a scientific article doesn't mean that the stories are being heard or will be heard justly. Ahmed's question resonated with my reflections relating to awareness and self-awareness in the listening and representing other people's painful stories. How do we as researchers ensure that we tune ourselves as the scientific measure tool we are to listen and represent in ways that do justice to others' experiences? How do we ensure a wider access to our research? Research reports, articles are exclusive. In my experience, important research remains inaccessible, for instance, to key actors who might badly need to listen to testimonies, such as those of assimilation discussed by Ahmed, or acquire the knowledge derived from those stories. Let me share a last example. Peter saw exhibition, the leader of the section of the adolescents and family at one of the Norwegian Labour and Welfare Administration's office now, asked me to have the presentation for her employees. The entire section came to the exhibition, and after they experienced the exhibition, we engaged in a fruitful conversation. The section leader wrote later that her employees meet users with very different backgrounds and stories, and that participating in the exhibition gave them new insights that they can apply in the understanding of their users. Namely, in 2019, Oslo was declared the first trauma-informed city in Norway. The initiative aimed to give information and awareness raising about the importance of understanding, recognizing, and responding to all types of traumas, while children and young people are exposed. It means showing the relationship between trauma and the physical and mental illness and risk behaviors such as crime and drug abuse. It is about spreading the knowledge that since trauma can cause a host of behavioral and health problems, it is needed to understand its effects, how people can be re-traumatized, or how the traumas can exacerbate, and also about the healing process. Traumatized people can heal when they enter into safe relationship with people who can validate the pain of their overwhelming experiences. However, imparting awareness is not that easy, and it can easily translate into giving information. The leader of the NAB office was much more open and understood the potential in the SOAR project to increase awareness among her employees. For them, thinking with the concept of SOAR was insightful. Among other things, we discussed that there is a tendency to see people visibly affected by the traumas as helpless victims, instead of focusing on their agency and resilience. As researchers, we too have to be aware of seeing people's agency. In ethical dimensions in trauma research, Thompson's remarked that people's ability to put into words painful experiences means they have elaborated, at least to a certain degree, those experiences. They have survived, and retelling their stories is in itself an act of resistance. So how the subjects and their stories are represented are not something that we can take lightly. To end this talk, I want to point out that the main motivation of the SOAR project has been recovery. My sense of recovery has two dimensions, my personal history and the political. I wanted to create a space for reflection on individual and collective levels about the impact of painful experiences in childhood and the effects on adulthood, and the role of the art in healing and awareness processes. For today, what I want to remark is that trauma is a topic that deserves much more attention, that art-based approach had a lot to contribute in the development of way of listening and representing more justly in research. And at last, that recognizing and validating new kinds of scholarship does not mean that we are going to sacrifice intellectual quality or rigor, but rather the opposite.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. This was really, there's so much there. So I'm looking forward to the discussion as well. Maybe you could sit there, and then I'm also asked to sit there. We have time for questions, of course, both here and yes, here. For those who are here, ideally, we would like you to stand there so that it's possible to see you. But if you're not comfortable with that, you can also just ask your question from there. And if it's not clear for those, then I'll repeat. And then for those of you who are online, you just need to raise your yellow hand or write in the chat, and then we can read your questions as well. So I think one thing is that you asked everyone questions as well. You were asking these questions about, okay, what happens when you look at this art and you look at it for a long time? You're asked to look at it and reflect on it for a long time. So I think that that's a very interesting point I would like to for people also to think about and maybe say something about. I'm sure that's interesting as an artist as well.
Yes, and I also think that maybe when people, at least for me, is when people say ask question is a kind of intimidated if you are just digesting thoughts, or so maybe people don't have questions but have comments or some thoughts or emotions that they want to share. So it will be, I will be happy to hear about them.
And I would really also like to give them, because I have a million things I can say, a million questions, but we talk a lot. So I don't think that this is the space for that. Tone, you had a first question. And please also introduce yourself if you want that to be was on the recording.
Thank you so much for a very, very interesting and elaborate and emotional, also intellectually emotional talk. I was so relieved by your talk because you so clearly emphasize the role of art in the sort of reflexive phase or analytical phase, and also in dissemination. And the points you put up in the arts-based approach is also sort of relieving. It's about creating distance and awareness, not about sort of getting even closer. Yeah? And it's about delaying conceptualizations rather than giving sort of fundamentally new ones. Or, of course, there are also new ones, but it's about sort of a very careful way of approaching this. So I'm going to push the point by asking you, are there ways in which not to use art in scientific research and in anthropology? And I ask that because there is a basic translation problem here, yeah, between, you know, what is it that we don't want to put into words, but that we sense by smelling, watching, listening, and so on. So, yeah, you get my drift. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, and it's a great question, and I think I will meditate a lot about that. And I don't think I am the proper person to answer that, because I am an artist and an anthropologist. So for me, it's impossible to to separate myself, and I haven't reflect about how other scientists might or might not use art. It's just, for me, was more my reflections about my artistic practice. So no, I don't have any answer to that question. So maybe maybe you have think about that, Cindy. I don't know. So
No, I'm not an artist, so I think that's. I think what for me is really interesting is this very deep reflection that you do have about fully being an anthropologist and fully being an artist. And of course, for all of us, these roles are quite different than what we have available. So your question on the, like, how long does it feel to stare at the kind of, and really take it in? What I can say is that for me, words were very easy to reflect on and to stare at and to think about and be touched by. I'm really not educated in watching art. So there I was much more, that's to me something, that a training I'm missing, where I feel like, okay, well, that I would love to really learn how to watch, which I think is extremely important for, as an anthropologist, because that's what we're also supposed, is this element of not just talking, but also observing and seeing. But I really feel that actually being able to watch art and being trained in art, I think would really contribute an awful lot in how is it that we observe? Because like you say, we have these methods courses, but we don't really learn how to observe. So that to me was something I really found quite remarkable in your conversations. Like, okay, well, maybe all anthropologists need to be taught how to really properly and deeply observe without all these kind of determined ways of seeing the world.
And for me, it's also a way, it was an example in relation to, I use it to think about the act of listening also, how we listen to other, can we really listen, and how long we can stay in that listening, you know? And so it was, I see a parallel between the visual and the listening. And so I think as a researcher, I will always use art in my research practices, but I don't think it's the only way. And I think that there are so many other ways to get the awareness, the training. The issue is to get that awareness when, as social scientists, working with these difficult topics. And
we have a question in the chat.
Yes.
So, it's from Stasha. So first of all, she says, thank you so much. And it's so interesting. And you said recovery has two dimensions, the personal story and the political. And she's wondering if you could elaborate on the political dimension a bit more.
Yeah, and as I briefly mentioned, it was this idea to create a space of reflection. I think that in our society, we have few spaces of reflecting what does it mean to have wounds. And wounds is the most existential and general, and this something is a shared experience, and we have few spaces. So for me, in a way, the political is that to have create the spaces to start the conversation about trauma, and also in relation to childhood care. We need to take care of our children in the society at all levels and all children, because wounded children also become wounded adults. So yeah, so this is, in this sense, I am thinking the political aspect of recovery.
There's a question there as well. This one. Careful of the wires here.
Yeah, that's okay.
For those who are online, you can also unmute afterwards and ask the question. It doesn't have to be in the chat. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Abhijit, and I'm a documentary photographer and author of a multimedia book on a tribe. I have lots to share. Honestly, as a survivor of all kinds of violence, I have a lot to share, and also thank you definitely for wonderful presentation and wonderful art and lovely poems. These were just amazing. Since you asked, you would like to know the answers for the questions you said.
Yeah, please.
So it's like no, yes, no, no, memories. I could just guess why you were asking questions. I was just writing down myself because I knew that that was going to come. So I was prepared, kind of. So yeah, empathy, understanding, connection. Those are the answers in the order of questions. No, I didn't find it intimidating at all. You should have maybe kept it for 40 seconds, 45 seconds for people to absorb and reflect. And as you correctly pointed out to me, that think deep within and try to face the traumas that you are. As a documentary photographer, my question is, do you think if you used photography instead of fine art, have created a little more difference? Because honestly, I'm sorry, but honestly, I've been heckled by a lot of people when I present my art with relating to trauma, but using nude and photography in the picture. And they literally trolled me online, not allowing to defend my presentation. That's question one. Question two, again, I apologize. If you identify yourself as a woman, is it easy for you to have access to such kind of hard-hitting stories that people see that thing and open up quickly? And similarly, is it very hard for you to detach yourself from all of them while writing, expressing, and also while drawing art? Because then maybe you relive. You never know. So, yeah, and I like the question wherein I think not use art. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was asked, don't use it. Don't use photography for hard-hitting images or conceptual photography for such kind of traumatic art. So I've already been told no. And right now I'm also dealing with someone else's trauma, which is out in the open, of course. So I did not use the picture that I had already created for such kind of trauma. So could you just throw some light on all these aspects?
Okay, I will start with the second one. If it is easier for people to open to me because I'm a woman, I don't know, but I have had both male, females, third gender people that have talked easily to me, even when the topic is completely different things. For instance, the woman who told me about these several rapes when she was a child, we were talking about social media and how she used social media. So, and then I don't know if it was the way I was listening to her, the way the conversation was developing, that she told me, she picked up the drawings and showed me to them. And I have in Uruguay, most of the participants of my research and my friends, they are men. And the same with my doctoral dissertation. I did, among others, field work among the Mbua Guarani, an indigenous group, due the language limitation because of the culture, they were men, and the men could tell me also different stories. So I don't know. So I cannot answer if there is some resonance because my personal experience that creates some connections. I am unsure. I hope not that there is a gender issue. I hope that it's an issue of awareness and working on the way one is listening. At least is what I am trying to transmit. That is not, it does not necessary that you have to have the same experiences or experience at all, but it's the way you engage in the listening. And in relation to, I see a difference between the photography and the fine arts. I see definitely, and there is a lot of ethical issues related to having reading discussions. There is a picture I remember that when I was studying medical anthropology that would stay with me with this photographies about the, how do you say, vulture?
Vulture.
Yeah, and the little girl, yeah. Which, yeah, you know, it's so. And then the question is what you do, and it's it's so. So I am not a photographer, and for my last research that you see is a new exhibition called Artivism, you have on the table. I ask myself also many times if I am going to take picture of the participant. Is no way. I am working. Yeah, so I see, the difficulty if there is a realistic photography. If you have more, if you do something with the photography, maybe it will be different.
We have time for one final question. Yes, you.
Sorry, it's okay if I stand here? Sorry.
Sorry about this. Thank you.
I want to first say thank you. By the way, my name is Tegel. I'm not an anthropologist. I know nothing about anthropology. I teach at the Art Academy in Oslo. So this is probably stupid, but it was really great to listen to it. I was so glad to hear somebody working with art from that point of view and using art as a tool of reflection from the academic point of view. That was great. My question was more, I saw you were referring to anthropologists working within the field, the thing that you work in. I presume I know nothing about it. So I would be interested to hear more about how do you relate to other artists working with trauma, like Lena Kronqvist or Kari Gerasmo. Do their use of painting, for instance, how do they påverka? How
Influence,
your work would be really interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. And to be honest, my relation to art has been really spontaneously and existential and intuitively. So I haven't, for many years, the series Sword, it took me 15 years to create. And it was not a series at all. It was just painting and trying to deal with all these difficulties. So it was in 2020, during the COVID, the pandemic, that I started to reflect what I am doing, what I'm really, and then since I work as an anthropology, I relate more to the anthropology, and I use, as you say, as a tool of reflection. I have not had the time and the conscience and the space to engage with other artists, but it's new and I am doing it now. I'm really, really also interested in connecting to many other anthropologists working also with drawing, with painting, trying to see the synergies. And this is the problem because science and art encounter in a kind of hierarchical way. And often art is seen as just as a tool and not as a how do you say, likeverdig partner? equal. So for me, have more the discussion in myself have been, can I do this? Can I do this? And so, but now I have encountered my way to, and accept my two roles, my two professions, and I see that the encounters as equal, and and I'm eager to continue working with art and and anthropology and searching for. So thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you all so much. I'm sure there are more questions or comments and more to process. So I hope you're also okay with if people have further questions or comments, they can always get in touch with you, also those online, because that's how you get new connections. Yeah, please write me if you have some questions that I can try to answer as best as I can. At last comment, I am having now an exhibition for my last research, and it's in two places. It's at the University of Oslo and Dijk-Manidalen. So those who are in Norway, I can visit just please. Just quite a crowd here. And also all of you online as well as here, you're invited for the next event, which will also be hybrid. On the 8th of June, filmmaker and writer Ibrahim Mussal will speak about The Art of Sin and some of his other projects. So welcome to that again. And I want to thank you here as well as online for staying with us. And I'm sure, like myself, you'll have a lot to, or like there's a lot that you've learned and maybe been moved by. So I assume, at least for myself, this is something that's going to take a while to process. And personally, I feel also for my work, it's going to have an impact. So I'm really looking forward to the many conferences that we are going to have. Thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you again at PRIO or online.